I think we'll go ahead and officially get started. Thanks so much for being here. You are at the SGSO-Network Bilingual Family Engagement in the Garden webinar. We've got Emily Büchi and Kim Yapias of the Wasatch Community Garden Program in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'll be passing it off to them in just a moment. My name is Tristana Perkle. I'm the Executive Director of the SGSO Network. I also have Daniel Barrera Ortega, who is our Program Specialist, here with us today. He will be sharing relevant resources in the chat and supporting this webinar. So fun to see your chats coming in. We've got folks from all over the place. Charleston, South Carolina, Plymouth, California, Half Moon Bay, California, Portland, Oregon. I'm not too far from you. Central Illinois, awesome, they're coming in. Thanks so much for being here. Great, if you could go on to the next slide, I've just got a couple of housekeeping items. Our webinar today is being recorded and it will be shared with you via email after the end of this webinar, usually after a couple of days. It's also in our recording library on our website. We have a resource handout, which collects a number of resources that Emily and Kim have pulled together, as well as a link to the slide deck. So if you want, some of the copy of the content from the slides, that will be in the resource handout. Daniel will be putting that into the chat in just a moment if he hasn't already. This webinar is an hour and 15 minutes long, so we've got a full hour of content for you, and we'll be saving the last 15 minutes for Q&A. As your questions come up, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A section of the webinar screen. So it has a little question mark inside of a chat box. We will be collecting those and asking them at the end of the webinar. And then finally, we'd really love your feedback on this webinar, as well as information on what future topics you'd like to hear about and how you'd like us to continue to share in these webinars. It helps us bring you the topics that are relevant to you, as well as the format that is helpful for you. If you could please go on to the next slide. This webinar is the final in our webinar series that highlighted attendees of the previous School Garden Support Organization Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute is an amazing program that is hosted by Life Lab and Whole Kids, a foundation of Whole Foods Market, in partnership with the SGSO Network. So Kim and Emily attended last December. This Leadership Institute is a great opportunity for leaders of school garden support organizations to come together, learn from one another, and grow in their skills on how to lead effective and equitable school garden support organizations. Usually about 50 people from 25 different organizations around the country attend. Here's our group photo from last December. Or actually, this is from 2 years ago. But we have been featuring leaders from the Institute in the last couple of webinars, and you can find those in our webinar recording library. Next slide, please. And then coming this fall, our next webinar series will be highlighting presentations from the Growing School Garden Summit that happened this past March in San Diego. The Growing School Garden Summit is a project hosted by Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation in partnership with SGSO Network and Life Lab. And we will be hosting a webinar series of presentations that were at the summit to allow any of you that couldn't attend in person or attended and want to see some other presentations. So we will be announcing that in the coming weeks, sharing the schedule, and it will be starting this fall. Next slide, please. And then just wanted to let you know if you will be at the National Farm to School Network Partner Annual Meeting in Minneapolis, Minnesota on August 15th. We are doing a school garden happy hour. So if you're attending that meeting and looking to have some in-person time with other school garden professionals, we will be having networking happy hour with snacks, drinks, and mocktails to allow you to connect with your other school garden folks, whether it's by role, by region, by organization type. We're going to be creating some networking activities. So please RSVP by August 9th if you will be there. And then with that, I am passing it off to Emily and Kim. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Tristana. So my name is Emily Büchi. I am the Youth and School Garden Program Director here at Wasatch Community Gardens.
And my name is Kimberly Yapias, and I am the School and Family Garden Manager here at Wasatch Community Gardens.
Yeah, and we're going to be taking you through kind of the how-to of how we do bilingual family engagement programs in the garden and how to get started with that. So just very briefly, a little bit of overview about our organization. So we're based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Our whole organization is about 34 employees now. Our mission is to empower people to grow and eat healthy, organic, local food. And we have a number of programs that work to do this, including community gardens, adult education workshops, our job training program, which works with women experiencing homelessness or transitioning back into the workforce. Our advocacy and justice program is new this year, and our volunteer program, in addition to having now 2 urban farms in Salt Lake City as well. And then, of course, we are part of the Youth and School program that runs these family engagement pieces. So today, we're going to be looking at families and the community. We often ask, and this is something you could think about a little bit of, this piece of why are families oftentimes forgotten. I know we do have a lot of school partners, Kim and I, who we work with, who are thinking a lot on their internal pieces of the garden, of working with their administrators and teachers, but not quite thinking about how do we get the families involved. Often it can be a challenge, so we'll talk about that today too. But what we've seen is that the most sustainable school gardens that we work with are also gardens that work really closely with their community, and that includes the families. So today, some of our goals for all of you is to learn our ins and outs of the model of family engagement programs that we have, understand some best approaches that we've found over the years for including families, especially cultural competency and multiple languages for your family and school garden, and to try to build some more confidence in trying out new programming like family engagement.
So yeah, today we're just basically going to talk about the ins and outs of our specific model that's called Family Garden Gatherings. And what this is, it's basically a weekly program that's offered in the spring, summer, and fall. And it is also dependent on like the school's capacity too, but pretty much we invite the families to come to their own school garden once a week to do either like family garden or family friendly activities in the garden, or just like even like garden planning and stuff. So a lot of different things. And currently we have 3 school partners. But in the past, or, you know, as we fluctuate, maybe we could have 7 partners or this and that. And in the corner, there's like our last year's numbers of how many people have participated, including the kids, and also like how much retention we've gotten from doing a family program. With our program, it's from the Wasatch Community Garden side. Our staffing structure is basically as a school and family garden manager internally, or while I'm not doing the facilitation part, there's a lot of program preparation. So that would include like gathering or knowing what materials to buy for that week's theme, or coordinating produce with our campus garden manager so that when we're out in these school gardens, we have food to give out to folks afterwards, or like gathering all the garden supplies that maybe these school gardens might not have at the moment. Other stuff is including like the marketing and handouts. And what that basically means is like, are we, you know, when the first time of the season comes, are we making the flyers ready for our schools to give out to the families? Or do we have the information ready for our school partner to send it out in like the parent network or this and that? Other stuff includes just general session planning. So it's like in the spring can look a lot more different than in the fall or summer. And So that involves a lot of like, oh, in this week, which is like the first week of spring, what are we going to do out in the garden? You know, what makes the most sense? Just so, you know, it fits very well, or it's just set up for more success. And like the last part internally is that Spanish language and cultural competency, which, you know, that a lot of that stuff includes doing like translations for the handouts. So it's in more than one language, or when we do have like handouts to give to folks afterwards of like how to grow or how to plant a tomato, it's in both languages or has more information that's relevant to our families. So that was more of the internal part. Externally, most of the stuff we do are like partner building. So maybe it's like what I'll do is go out in the field. So maybe attend a school event to understand like what is this family community, or go out and do like tabling and stuff, or whatever our partner recommends. One of the main things I do is that program facilitation. So every week I'm out in the garden with the families, helping to teach the families like how to plant stuff, or just to listen and talk and build that connection. We already talked a little bit about that outreach, where, you know, that falls under like tabling or attending different events, or just being more involved in the school so that a lot of the families get to know us. And another part of this program is the intern management, which we'll go into a little bit more later. But yeah.
Yeah, and then my role, because so for these programs, though we have a staff in the whole organization of over 30, our youth and school team is 5, and then Kim really is the main person overseeing these programs as the school and family garden manager. My role is often a support for her, so a lot of what I'm doing is to help. Internally, it's help coordinating amongst other team members. Sometimes, you know, during certain times of the year, kids might be around more. We're going to talk more about the logistics of kind of how we tend to set up these family sessions. Sometimes kids are there. That's part of the point, is that it's for all ages. And so we will ask one of our educators if they have the capacity based on their other programming to come and help out. So I'm going to be helping with kind of figuring out who's going to go help Kim when extra support is needed. I'm also helping to do some of that cross-program coordination. So if we do need to work with somebody in the volunteer program, for example, then I can help kind of get that going. And then I'm also looking at our budget and resource management so that Kim doesn't have to think about that piece. Externally, I'm a support if Kim needs it for that partner building. Occasionally, I will be helping to like attend meetings with them, or if there are school events or things, I'm often another person from our organization who's there to build that relationship. I also do program observations to kind of see another perspective of how are things going, what could we improve upon, what is working really well. I'm helping a lot with grant support. So we do have a development team, and we'll talk about that in the next slide and a little bit further down, but I'm taking a lot of the information we're gathering about these programs and helping to put them into grants so that we can fund these programs, and then also reports that we end up sending to the partners occasionally, or it's part of our annual report. A lot of that reporting and data collection falls to me. We wanted to have this slide up here as well to just show that we do have a lot of dependencies for this program. This is not to say that you can't just go ahead and start if you have a lot fewer people, but this is showing all of the different pieces that have come together to grow our family engagement program into what it looks like today. And so internally, we do work with the marketing team, as Kim was talking about, with these programs, and especially with the translation. In this case, we do translations into Spanish. So we have English and Spanish, though we do have participants who speak other languages as well, and we're working on how to better address that as in addition to Spanish. We do have a marketing team here at the organization, so they do help with some graphics designing for flyers. With these groups, we tend to use a lot more analog, not so much digital. So people aren't signing up digitally typically for these programs. They're It's word of mouth and handing out physical flyers. As I talked about, we do have youth educators who will support Kim when needed, especially when there are kids and adults, because we can do a lot of activities together, but it does help to have sometimes a kids activity and then talk with the parents or the family members about something else. We have a development team, which is very helpful to help us fund this. Our internal education manager is somebody who helps, especially with Kim, like setting up some of those session topics. And if there's very specific topics people are interested in, then she's going to be helping gather that information. We do also have a big crossover with volunteer groups, especially for garden projects. So we work with the volunteer director, and our campus garden manager is who manages what produce is grown that we give away at the programs. So we give away pounds of produce every year as part of this program, is that when people come, they get food. And so the food is grown here on our garden campus, and we have to work with her in order to know what is available. And then externally, when we're thinking about all of the people that we work with and who is involved in this, there are a lot. Obviously, there are grantors if that's the way that we're going for funding. But it also just working with the district. So it's not just working with one person or just the families at the school. Even higher up in the district, folks know what this program is like. We do have a MOU with the school district about access into the schools. We have to at least have awareness with the principal of principals knowing what's going on at their school. Often there's somebody who's a family liaison, and we'll talk more about that in the next couple slides. Custodial or auxiliary / facilities support are also super crucial, I'm sure, as you all know, for keeping the gardens going. Often that has to do with access and water supplies. So this is kind of to show that there are so many people that we bring together. There are a lot more stakeholders than just the families and us. Because we ultimately want to make sure that this is a program that's sustainable for the school. The garden is sustainable. It's not just something that if we weren't able to show up, the community isn't supported. And then, so kind of to go into that school part of the support system, these photos on the, I think, left-hand side, the dedicated school partner photos, those are our partners at our current sites. Elizabeth and Tilly, they are people who have different roles at each of the sites, but they're people who Kim talks with all the time. They have a lot of rapport with the families, and they also have knowledge and access into the sites and what the site needs, which are really important. So when you're thinking about who could I work with at a school, this could be a lot of different people. We often call them garden champions, and I'm sure you all have someone in your mind who, it could be a teacher, it could be a family advocate, somebody who has knowledge of the school and the garden and who's involved with the families already. But it's also really important to understand that this person needs to be able to have the capacity to help facilitate. Building trust with the family community takes a really long time. Kim has that, as in droves. The families love working with Kim. Kim's been doing this for a few years, and it's really important to have another person there who's helping to show this is a person to be trusted, and we can want to work with them and continue coming back. When we think about the support factors that dedicated school partner provides for these programs, it is that school and community rapport, that trust building. Sometimes it's that physical site access. We don't have keys to the school. We might not have water keys. These people possibly do, or we do need somebody who has that access. Also, somebody who's another person for outreach, someone who's maybe already involved, is planning to go to school events to help share about the program. And then this person is also very helpful in identifying school needs and interests. This person also could be a translation person for you as well, depending on staff or volunteer capacity. If folks aren't bilingual, and that's a big kind of barrier, possibly someone who is a partner could be someone you work with to work through that barrier.
And yes, another big important part with this program, or even just like that highlight or essentialness of having like the school or the community be involved in this program, is our community interns. Who could that be? There's a lot of people that could be it. What we recognize is that when a family or a community member from that school is part of this program, or that is wanting to take a leadership role or has a lot more garden knowledge than like we do, it's really impactful, especially I think for the families that it's already someone in their community that they know maybe. And it's also really important because a lot of the community members, they know their community. So even like outside of the school, it's like, oh, these events are happening, or it's like, I know this group of folks that want to be involved in the garden, or that can be. And what's also really crucial for like these community interns is that they're also wanting to have like that have an interest in being more involved in this program, whether it's mentorship of like just wanting to learn what it's like to be kind of on the other side of like, oh, I want to learn how to, or it's like, I have a lot of garden knowledge, but I don't know how to, I haven't really had experience of like how to show it to a group, or I don't, or it's like, I do want to be more involved, but I need more understanding of how to actually run this program, or to be a support to you and this and that. And also another important thing is that these community interns, they also don't have to have the prior garden knowledge. If they're even just like interested in like learning or gardening, that's where us as an organization can come in to help bring those support factors for them. But the support factors that community interns also bring is that they know their families and communities. So it's like, which is a real helpful guide for us when we're trying to plan out these sessions, or knowing like what to teach, or what is really relevant to the families that are wanting to come to this garden program. They also most likely already have that trust and connection to families. Maybe they've been at that school, or their kids been at that school since kindergarten, so they know a lot of folks, they know the teachers, they know the admin. And like Emily said before, it also can be someone who knows the languages of the families in that school community, so that could help be even more of a connector for that language and translation support if I wasn't able to speak Spanish. A little bit more into what this internship is. We are pretty lucky and like have very strategically planned with the sustainability of this program to have people be involved, but we also recognize that we cannot have folks' involvements be for free. So how we shaped this internship is that it's a leadership and mentorship opportunities for the school community partner. And this person, like I said, could be anyone in the community. Most of the folks that are pictured here, they're either parents of, or like families that have gone to garden club before, that go to the school, that have been in this community for a long time, that wanted to be involved in this program. And how this program is shaped is that it's a 40-hour internship. It doesn't mean that they work 40 hours per week, but it's a total of 40 hours in about a season. So maybe like 6 weeks. And we do pay them, I think it comes around $15 an hour. And we also recognize that, most of these interns or community members, they're also doing many other different things, or even being like a parent, or, juggling a lot of things. So we really are intentional with making the internship as flexible as possible. That is like, you don't have to come like all the way to our main garden campus. Like, I can come to you, like, let's know what your strengths are or what you want out of this internship, so I could fit your skills of interest. Just one quick example is with Marilu. She's one of the people that had prior garden knowledge and just wanted to really learn how to be in front of a group or like talk to folks. So we really focus on the teaching part. Whereas Yolanda, she also has a lot of garden knowledge, but her strength is really into that community building part. So we really built on that with like, oh, this is how we can do outreach, or I love your idea about bringing food to family garden gatherings. So it's a really flexible way, or how we viewed this internship is that it's really flexible. It fits into whatever the community member wants it to be. And it's also just really helpful and great to have more folks be involved versus just me and the school partner.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to move into a little bit more detail about the kind of program structure. So program timing varies, often season by season. As Kim said before, our Family Garden Gatherings program runs spring, summer, fall, typically the garden kind of season. But program timing is really based on capacity of the partner and the interns and the families. So, for example, in the spring, typically at one of the schools, the timing is after school, which often also means then that kids are a little bit more involved because they're not in school. Versus for another one of the sites in the spring, the timing for the families worked better to be about midday. So Kimberly works with the site to figure out what works best in the summertime. Both programs have been in the evening, and they've found, trying to find that sweet spot with heat. It gets really hot here. And so they've learned, through trial and error sometimes that evenings more families can join, and sometimes it's pretty late. So this is also thinking about the flexibility of staff timing, is that Kim's programming often is happening at very different times from like our on-campus programming. We might have field trips here that are that more typical sort of like 9 to 4 timing, but Kim is doing programming into the evening. And then format and content is also based upon what the school partner wants and seasonality. So we do have, we have our internal education manager, we have years of activities and handouts that we've made about different spring crops or fall, content. But the format of like, what are we going to be doing on this day is very flexible. As Kim was talking about, a lot of that is also worked out with the families and with the intern. There's always going to be fun additions. Often, again, if kids, especially if it's a time when kids are going to be around, then Kim knows that she needs to have activities also for kids and adults. It's a very casual and fun setting. It's not like we're lecturing at the families. It's really that community building feeling. Oftentimes this means sometimes that they're doing garden projects. There's a photo in here of them, moving some wood chips around. So a couple of the school sites have had they need to change out the soil in their garden boxes. So that might be what they're doing that day. Versus you can see there's some photos that are cooking. That could be kind of the basis for one of those lessons. And then in that winter season, Kim does keep up that trust and rapport through the year, even if the family garden gatherings aren't happening, because here in Salt Lake, it's not garden season. There are still ways that the families are getting together. So at one of the sites, especially, they do monthly potlucks or other opportunities to do like pre-workshops to gather and even just share, share community, especially around food. This program started as a recipe sharing kind of program, and food is really integrated into all of these sessions, especially like as these programs have grown. Every time that I've gone, one of the family members has brought something to share, and more people do. We bring produce, we try to bring snacks and things. Having food there is a really great way to pull people together and to have them share their knowledge of how different cultures use different foods. What recipes do they have that they want to share out? So again, that big piece, that bottom part, what really shapes how each day looks is that collaboration and partnership with the school partner. We definitely don't want to go in with like, we are the experts, we know everything, we're just going to tell you things. It's understanding what the school partner, what the families want to learn about, want to share about or teach about. It's making sure that there's an understanding that this is a reciprocal relationship. And that goes back with that sustainability piece, is that we're really trying to set up these programs to be something that eventually we wouldn't be needed to be there to be a liaison for the community or for the garden. It's not dependent upon an outside organization. That's where those internships come in as well, is that all of these community members are growing skills, leadership skills, mentorship skills to be able to do this on their own. Also, it's important to help to have this integrated into school culture. So are other teachers coming to these programs? Is there a chance at school events for the garden to be involved and these families to be involved? Because the school can often be a safe space for a lot of these families, which is why it's such a great opportunity to use a school garden site as a place that these families are already, comfortable in. And then every season and every time, it's all about adjusting to capacity levels and interest. Sometimes we have to cancel or postpone a family garden gatherings because some people are not available to be there, or it's way too hot, or there's a lightning storm has happened. The last couple springs, we've definitely had to push a few of them because of the intensity of winter weather. So as Kim was talking about, a big piece in thinking about how we do these programs, even though for the school site, it might be, it's just once a week. It's all about flexibility of what they're interested in, what resources we can provide to really build that community space.
We're going to go a little bit more into what's happening during each season, since at least in Utah, our seasons can look very different depending what time of the year we're in. So in spring, one of our main themes for that whole season is garden scientists. So that main idea is just that basic understanding those garden basics of we're just coming out of winter, what are we going to do to even prepare for the garden? What should we even plant with this colder weather, this and that? And also it's just that understanding of, and especially with Utah, how different it could be from 1 week to another of it's snowing this week, it's warm this week, of there are different crops that are able to withstand that weather. So during those themes or those sessions, that might involve having planting plans, especially in those weeks where maybe there's a really weird weather change and we can't even go outside. Another inside activity could be seed starting. So a lot of just very garden focused ideas, and especially maybe towards the end of the spring, even getting ready for summertime with those summer crops. And then for the summertime, our main focus is art and nature. And with that, it's just mainly because hopefully by the end of spring and the beginning of summer, everything's pretty much planted. So there's not as much garden emphasis, just because it's more watering and maintaining. So that really gives us a chance to explore our own school garden space, just to have either more ownership for it or just a place to explore different parts of it, just more of those fun artsy activities. Some examples of what we've done during the summertime is we've done something called neighborhood garden tours. So that's when, that's a chance when most of the gardens already grown at even our family's houses that are really close by. So we'll take a little field trip to a family's garden, and it's a really fun chance for the family to show and highlight, oh, this is what I grow, or this is one of the favorite crops that my family loves to eat, so this is why we have it, or this and that. Another big idea with the summertime, especially since school is out, is that we want to really focus on those family friendly activities, just because most likely we will have the kids be involved in the garden, and it's also a real big priority for families, or a big feedback that they've given us of we want to be able to do stuff with the kids, or in the summertime we have the kids, so we want to be able to bring them and have it be more inclusive too. And then some other fun little art activities we've done, garden signs, or we've used stuff from the garden to, in that picture, we made little clay pots and stuff. And then in the fall, when, at least in Utah, most of the harvest is ready and available, we do, our focus is garden chefs. So that main idea is, what are we gonna, or that harvest exploration. And this is a really important concept because many of the families we work with, they come from many different countries and cultures. So a tomato can mean many different recipes depending on like what family you ask. So it's just a fun time to explore that concept or to learn about each other and to understand like, oh yeah, this is the many ways that I can make something with this crop. And also with that is that end of season gardening, because most of the time, especially I think to families that are new to gardens, they might think that, oh, garden season's over, there's nothing left to plant. So that's where we do like garlic planting or cover crops, this and that, or just to know that, let the families know that there are a lot of different stuff. You could still grow food in the fall.
So we're going to kind of jump to some of, we've been kind of talking through this about our sort of best practices, thinking about cultural competency. This is a big piece of our work. We use the acronym READY, which is race, equity, accessibility, thank you, diversity and inclusion. So in all of our programs, we're really focused on making our programs more ready. And with this program in particular, we're working with a number of very different and diverse family structures or cultures or situations. So when we're thinking about inclusion, that's where this piece of having the families involved in shaping their own program is so important. This goes back to why we pay community members to be interns. It's really showing ways of valuing the expertise that they bring. So again, we're not coming in to try to teach them what, like, this is the type of gardening we do here and this is what we're going to do. If they're asking how to do these things, we have that information, but also a lot of the folks who are attending have prior garden knowledge or might know more than they think they do. And so it's also about building that community to show that they can be mentors for each other and getting that conversation going. We're learning from them as much as that the families are learning from us. There's a lot of different ways that people can help in the garden, as Kim was talking about with a couple of the different interns. Some of the interns have, maybe more specific gardening experience versus some of them are a lot more focused on building that community or bringing people in. And so it's finding the strengths that everybody has. I'm sure everybody listening has had that experience of talking to a new person in public about your work with gardening, and often you get the response, if I ask someone like, oh, do you like to garden? And they just say, oh, I'm so terrible at gardening. And so we're really trying to get away from that thought that like you have to be good at gardening to enjoy being in the garden, to plant things, to learn. If something doesn't grow, it's an opportunity to learn. And then a big piece of this inclusion is that this is open to all of the community. We're working really hard with the school partner or the site partner to create a safe space, safe space to share ideas, different cultures. There's a really lovely story that Kim was telling me about working at one of the sites in particular where there are a number of different families from all over the world who speak a lot of different languages. And at one point there was an intern teaching in Spanish, Kim was translating to English, and then another person was translating into another language for the rest of the families. And so that's just part of that piece of, even with only a few people who are able to do those translations in that moment, everybody was still able to participate in the programming. Then when we think of cultural relevancy as well with this, that does mean some of this, language access, but also it's thinking about what crops are accessible or relatable or relevant to the people who are growing them. And we also work with our agricultural operations department to get seeds and crops that people want to grow, that they recognize or that sound fun for them to grow. This is where those meetings with partners, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next slides, come in of figuring out what are the participants' interests. This is also the highlighting other concepts of gardening, especially, you know, that's what Kim was talking about, and especially like summer and fall of gardening is a lot more than just like getting your hands into the dirt. That is a huge part of it, but there can be art, there can be recipe sharing. This could go into medicinal uses. There could be lots of different knowledge that is shared in the garden space. And then of course we are, as we've said before, we really try to make this all ages welcome. And then some of the barriers that we definitely think about a lot, language is a big piece of it. And so again, we really, in English and Spanish right now is what our resources are in. We translate those, Kim does that translation, and that's a lot of work. And so we're also figuring out with our other departments for other languages as well, how can we have more accessibility to our handouts and to our activities, and work with the partner to make sure that we're giving that accessibility to everybody. Sharing resources is really important. Sharing out also about like the different events at the school or that the community partner is doing, not just what we're doing, but any opportunity to continue working together even outside of the family garden gathering space. So if we're having an event, we want those families to feel like they can come to that event as well. The accessibility piece, a big barrier is that the schools are often within walking distance versus we do have this really gorgeous kind of campus garden space that we're very fortunate to teach out of a lot. However, this is too far away for a lot of those families. So that's where that school partner or thinking strategically about sites comes in, is that this is a place that families are already going and is close enough for most of those families to walk. We provide supplies as well. So Kim puts together spring and fall like kits that every participant gets to take home. Those could have tools or sometimes like hats or like cooling things for the summertime, but also any other supplies that are needed to do whatever activities they're doing are things that we're providing, so that families don't have to show up with anything. We're giving constant fresh produce. Again, that food piece is a big aspect of this program. So not only is there often like prepared food that folks are sharing at these spaces that sometimes the community members are bringing, but we're also giving any produce that we grow in our gardens or at our urban farms go straight back to programming. So we're also trying to give them produce they want. And in the spring, especially, we do provide seeds and seedlings for the families. At some of the sites, it's kind of a community garden, school garden mix. So families will have their own box. At other sites, they might be trying to grow things in their own spaces. And so we provide seeds and seedlings for that as well.
One example of how this program has kind of grown into more like cultural competency, or like what can happen when we listen to like the community and what they want, is an extension of this program called Sabores de mi Patria. And what this is that, or where this even came from, is coming from a lot of the families wanting more culturally relevant like teachings or workshops. Many of the families, they come from Central America or they have indigenous roots, and many of them grow corn, bean, and squash in that region in Central America. It's called La Milpa. So that really falls a lot into people who have Maya roots or just in that general area. So what came from that is this program called Sabores de mi Patria, where we have a lot of families such as Judith, she has like these cultural roots of knowledge of like knowing like the significance of these three crops growing together, and also like just like how, or like the cultural part of it of like the planting ceremony or the seed blessing and this. So during these workshops, that's where, or a lot of these pictures are where you know, as a community, or we invite the whole community to come to not only learn about La Milpa and just how culturally important it is to a lot of the families that have the connection to it, but also to plant together. So it's just another piece of that, of the bigger picture, that a lot of the families already come with a lot of garden knowledge. And even with just gardening, it's fully extends to the culture of foods or the culture of your roots and this and that, or the culture to the earth. So we want to just be able to provide that support of, you know, if families do want to share that with the community, it's like, what can us as an organization do to support that? And how that looks is basically, you know, what supply, or I ask like the families, like, what supplies do you need, or what specific seeds do you need, or plants, so that we can plant la milpa, and like, what do you need for this and that. But I really or with these the Sabores de Mi Patria program, it's really, you know, they are the ones like teaching this, and we are the ones that are kind of being that internal support for them to be able to do this and for that garden to grow.
All right, we're gonna jump kind of into some more details. The next many slides are pretty like intensively detailed, and if we go too quickly, of course, you can ask questions afterwards. But so kind of thinking of our timeline outside of that spring, summer, fall that we talked about, January through March of our like winter sort of time is the time that we're doing those preseason meetings. So those are what Kim is typically doing with school partners, going over goals and scheduling, figuring out capacity, what times and topics work best for both partners. This could include, as it says in the external tasks, like garden walkthroughs to figure out what projects are needed for the rest of the year, and or for the rest of even the season. Kim will do these throughout the year as well, but we definitely have time to do them January through March. And then this is also if we're creating partnership agreements. Again, we do have an MOU specifically with the Salt Lake City School District, especially for some of that like accessibility onto school grounds. So that's a really important piece, depending on your site, to make sure that you have an agreement if necessary about like access, or if there's any liability forms that need to be exchanged between you and your site. Internally, this is the time when a lot of the handouts and marketing and flyers are being created and translated. We're working on scheduling and planning, obviously, and then this is also a time when we're doing some major supplies purchasing. So thinking about what tools and kits or activity supplies are going to be needed. We do this throughout the year, but this is kind of our planning time. This is also a big time for community outreach. So that's going to like school nights. If there's a school event, sometimes we do like STEM nights in March. We're getting into Earth Day time. Is that March or April? It's April. Okay. So roughly around that time. But a lot of the schools will have like during school, different like tabling opportunities that we'll do. And then this is also the time when we're doing, with some sites, it's preseason workshops. So it's more of those indoor like garden planning, or doing a craft together that still involves the garden, or those winter potlucks.
During the season, just a day in the life of like during the day of when we do know we have garden program going on, that's usually when I'm gathering all the supplies and handouts that we need for that day. And a lot of just like on-site, or I'll even come like maybe half an hour early just to make sure like all the produce is out, all the supplies are pretty much ready for when the families come, we can get started. We're already going in and everything. And then of course we'll do like that facilitation of the program. Usually it's about an hour. At some sites where, you know, it's more of a, let's like casually hang out, garden together, maybe have food, maybe I'll be there for like 1.5 hours or this and that. During every session, we do an attendance sheet, and also ask the question of like, what was your favorite part of today, or what did you learn? So that's kind of that internal demographic or internal information that we gather, so that after the session, that's when I do the attendance log, just to document like how many people have been coming in, also the session log, just so, you know, in the winter time when I don't remember what happened in the spring, like it's like, oh yeah, this is what happened when I tried doing a worm bin this week, like how did that go, like should we do that next year and everything. And that's also when I'll put in all the photos in our drive and just that data updating, just so we have that as an organization and that our school partner has that. During the week of family garden gatherings, even before the day of, that's usually when those communications happen. So the main thing with communications is to our school partner of like, oh, are we for sure going to plant tomatoes this week? Or are you still good to have this session this week? Or will we need to reschedule or this and that? It's also with our participants just to maybe send out a text or a reminder of like, hey, this week we're going to be doing like an art project. So make sure to bring this or that, or it's going to be hot today, but so we're going to move our session to 7 p.m. instead of 6:30. Also, just those supply purchases, making sure we have that produce for our program, and just any other handouts and documents. Some key practices during the season that I found have helped out a lot is just that schedule coordination with school calendar. And that's where your school partner comes in, because they're going to know when it's parent teacher conference and everyone and anyone is busy and programming shouldn't happen that week, or when is the first week of school or the last week, because those are super busy times, or is there going to be a huge school event that's going to kind of not make sense to have garden programming. So just kind of scheduling it out so that it fits that school schedule, so that it fits the parent schedule as well, most importantly. Also, those one-time opportunities is very important, because in this program, we do have a lot of repeating families that come, but there's also those families that want to participate but might not be able to come each week. So those one-time opportunities can look like inviting the whole school to do a garden cleanup, or when we have a ton of produce, maybe we'll have a tomato sandwich party or a salsa fiesta, this and that, just so more families get to know the program without feeling like they have to commit to going every week. We already talked about that flexibility of the program. So just being willing to adjust, or not having that mindset that there's only one way to do the program. We found that just being flexible, like listening to our partners and families, that's families want to come to something that's more shaped to what they're interested in. And also just that listening part. And that lastly, that involvement with the community. So it's not just a one-sided relationship with the school of we're just doing programming, we have our data, like we're going to go, it's like, oh yeah, we're happy to go table for this other school event for you, or we have a ton of produce this week, do you know if there's families that want it? So being very reciprocal and thoughtful about that too. So then the last part with closing out the season, just that general stuff with the organization is, of course, meeting with the school partner. So that big on reflection and debriefing, just to get the feedback. So next year we can learn from what our feedback and reflection's been, and also planning for the next season, because what I've learned is if you wait till the last week, it's kind of already, the new season's already coming to the start. So just kind of knowing what's coming. And with the organization part of it, it's that end of season survey that we give to the families, just asking them, how did the season go? And the big thing with the demographics of this is what our communities look like, and just so we can have that for our information, for the school information, and for applying for grants for the program, and just those internal reflections too.
We'll breeze through the last little bit, but you have the slides so that you can see the information as well. When we talk about grant reporting, this is a pretty unique program, and so we found, we have a lot of quantitative and qualitative information. We try to take a lot of photos, we get a lot of anecdotes. Kim does those exit interview questions for that feedback of what are your favorite parts. Kim also does her own teaching logs of how things went. And we do interviews and surveys with those partners. And part of that is part of those meetings. We do a survey for all of the participants that does go over demographics, and that includes race and ethnicity, zip code. All of those surveys are anonymous. That is a really important piece, and Kim does those at the end of the season after she's already built that rapport, because we don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Some of the families are coming from a lot of different situations and don't feel super comfortable sharing that information. So it is voluntary, and most of them really do fill it out because they also understand part of this is for grant reporting, but also part of this is for us to understand how to better serve our communities. Then we do some other reflections as well to help with partner building. So thinking about like gifts that we give. Kim makes this awesome calendar with a bunch of photos from the whole year and information and quotes that we give to all of the partners and the families. So there's a lot of different ways that you can think about gathering info, especially if you need it for funding. A big piece to point out here before I move on is that we not only count individuals, but we count the number of interactions. So for grant reporting, especially when they're looking for like numbers, we're talking about retention with these families. That is the big piece of impact, is how many times are they coming back. Then when we think about budget and funding basics, when we're thinking about budget, we're looking at staffing and interns and how much time and salaries that go into that, but also supplies. So this is all of our educational supplies. If we're buying seeds and seedlings, we can, if we need to for certain types of grants, report the monetary amount of the pounds of produce that we're giving out to families. And then what we have put here in staffing and interns also that I want to point out is ideally we'd love to be able to do more compensation for a partner. And so potentially as you're working or thinking about a school or a site partner, this could be someone that you're working on a grant with so that both of you get compensation for this program.
So thank you all so much for just being able to listen to kind of our model with this weekly family focused programs. But now we're just going to talk about how there are more options to thinking about family focused programming at your school. So it doesn't have to be a weekly session with like having a paid staff member. It could start out small with such as like one-time volunteer opportunities, such as an Earth Day garden cleanup, or inviting the whole school just to be at the garden or to be involved in those school events or working with that. So with some of those things, it's just important to think about partner capacity. We're very flexible if like we're working with a teacher, if it's very busy in the spring and they're like, we can only do maybe monthly in the springtime, like that's okay for us, like we don't want to force having like someone to come like weekly, or if it's a new program, just to focus on like just having folks in the garden and not like how many times we're at the garden. That's where it's also important to find that garden champion. So someone who is like part of that school community, who wants to be part of that, who maybe is already doing a lot of work with the school garden or with families. And especially with finding that family liaison who already has that connection, or so that you and that school partner or that family liaison can work on building this program with both of our strengths together instead of individually.
Awesome. Cool.
And these are just, I think we've touched on a lot of these different impacts, but just to highlight some of them, it's like, this is like one of the only programs that we do at WCG that is multi-generational. So it doesn't just have to be a parent at the school. We had a lot of aunts and grandparents that maybe bring their kid who might be too young for kindergarten yet. So it's that multi-generational support and connection that the families really love. We talked a lot about food access. So as the families are experiencing learning how to garden, like at their school garden, we're still providing that fresh food so that people have the resources they need. And this not only helps with that family bonding and that community building of that school, but also just the garden ownership of it, of like people feeling comfortable going to the garden, even during not garden or the session hours. It's like we have families that feel comfortable enough to go to the garden during the summertime or with their whole family, or just that feeling like this is a place they can come in and like really own and love and make it their own.
Cool. So thank you. I think we'll pass it back to Tristana to lead the question and answer, but this is also in the slides. You can learn more about our programs, contact either of us at any time if you have more questions, follow us on Instagram to see some cool photos. But yeah, I think I'll go back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim and Emily, for sharing such amazing detail, such generous detail about your program and how it operates. I'm sure folks found so much helpful information in that, and all the different pieces. I know I certainly did. So we have some great questions, kind of diving more into the specifics. What are the types of roles an intern can have? Kim, you mentioned community engagement education. What exactly does this look like, and are there other roles that you have or consider having?
Yeah, so we found that it really, or with those 3 interns, like it really just depends on what they're interested in. Like, for example, there is that certain role of like being that garden teacher and everything that, oh yeah, that fits in with like kind of what they're looking for. But as we've had more interns, we've seen other roles appear of like community outreach and community builder. Yolanda's a great example of that, of she knows so many families and is willing to call and text them and be like, come on to the garden, I'm going to be here, I'm going to play my music, I'm going to make this as welcoming as a space as possible and have like food here. So she, she's more of that community builder versus like that teacher. And with our last intern, Judith, she has a huge, like, I would consider like that role to be maybe like cultural ambassador or this and that, with that huge cultural context. Judith is actually from Guatemala and grows la milpa and has Maya roots. So she's the one that really leads those, like the Sabores de Mi Patria workshops, and does a seed blessing and ceremony, and is willing to share parts of her culture to the families there. So I think those are the 3 main ones we've identified, but it could be, there, as you get to know who your community is, or maybe who wants to be involved in the program, just kind of identifying those interests and skills and kind of going with that, and understanding as an organization how to support them.
Amazing, thank you. And just some more questions, kind of specifically about the internship program. How do you identify the individuals, and then how do you onboard and train them?
So with identifying the individual, we really rely on our school partner. Like we said, our school partner can either be like a teacher, or it's been like a family liaison. So they're going to be the one who really knows like these families for probably many years. That's like, oh yeah, this person is like really interested, has the time, or has talked to me about like how much they love the garden program. So we really fall on like the recommendations from that our school partner, since their main role or support is to understand who their families are. So we're not constantly looking for someone.
And the onboarding piece, Kim has translated a number of our like employee onboarding documents into Spanish. We don't have to go into all of the details that we do with a like full-time staff member. But typically they meet with me, they'll meet with other people around the organization to, talk about the agreement for the internship. But a lot of the onboarding is working with Kim, figuring out what they're interested in, attending workshops, our adult workshops that we host here. Part of it is that as well, to like gain more garden knowledge. And
some other parts with onboarding is just like really understanding their schedule. So we'll be like, oh yeah, I can meet once a week at this time at the library. So we'll do all of these one-on-ones just so I can help like train and mentor like these our interns, like just so they're up for success with that. And also with just for them to really understand the program. So that could fall into, let's meet with the school partner and have a conversation together, or let's go to the other school so you could see examples of how this program can go.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like they don't necessarily join as a cohort, but there was a question of, do they join as a cohort? And can you share again how many interns you have per season? I know you mentioned that, but if you could share that again.
So per season, we will usually do one intern per season, just so that I can schedule my time to really focus on them and to have these one-on-one sessions. As we've done this internship for a number of years, we had really great interns. We want to continue to have them be part of this group and stuff. So we are also offering like part-time internships. So maybe instead of a 40, it'll be a 20, so that continual mentorship even between the people who have been in this program.
Awesome, thank you. How do you approach language accessibility and communication when people only speak their language and do not necessarily read their language? This question asker, experiences with some of the refugee families they work with, or trying to find better ways to communicate with them outside of their events. And I will also pose this question and any of the questions to all of our folks listening, if you also have some suggestions for how to work with this and any of the other questions we're asking. I meant to say that earlier.
Yeah, so this has happened. This is actually a very appropriate question for one of our sites in Glendale, since they have so many families that come just from many different parts of the world. And what's great with our school partner is that they've told us that, or usually schools also have that sort of resource where if they have a lot of families that speak different languages, they have people who are there to attend PTA meetings or school events to be that translator already. So that's kind of in the works of when we do like bigger workshops, or to have like some of those folks that are being paid by the school to be there. And also with our handouts and stuff, it's really important that we do know the language so that we're able to at least have some sort of translation. It might not be the most perfect translation, but just something there. And one of the big things I learned with Elizabeth, who's our school partner from Glendale, she's Salvadorian, so she speaks English and Spanish, but works with a ton of families. She says that gardening is for every language. So even if we don't speak the same language, like the families come with an interest of gardening, and we could just learn together. We don't necessarily have to speak to each other or have perfect language understanding to be able to have families be involved. Just being welcoming is like very impactful for families that might speak different languages other than Spanish.
Absolutely, thank you. And you mentioned you've got these kind of like family gatherings, community gatherings. How long are they usually? One of the questions we were.
We usually go for about an hour, and it's also just understanding just the flexibility part of it is if we say like, oh, 1 p.m. and like all the families maybe are gathering like their stuff to pick up their kid, maybe they'll come at 1:30. So as an organization part, I come with an understanding that I might not be able to, or that I'm probably going to stay a little bit longer than 1 hour, but we usually try to stick to 1 hour so that families know like how long they can stay. Obviously everyone's welcome to stay longer, but 1 to 1.5 hours.
Great, thank you. Love that you provide food. That's always an incentive for folks. This person who asked this question says that their public health department is pretty strict about food and would not allow them to share at any events, certain events, anything not made in a non-certified kitchen, and even store-bought things can be dicey. Do you have any similar problems? And if so, how do you work around it, or how does anyone else who's listening work around those challenges?
I think we haven't really run into any of those challenges from the public health department. So if anybody else has similar things, the produce piece, possibly I'm thinking like when we give the produce, we're just giving like whole things. They're not necessarily eating it there. So there could be like maybe a workaround for that. But we haven't run into any issues in terms of the sharing of food.
And I think that's a very good question. Like Emily said, we haven't run into that issue, but that can be a question that you can ask your school partner when starting to plan for the beginning of the year, if there's any restrictions with food, or if there's something that they have to ask their own other people about in the district before we give out produce. So that's a great question to ask in those preseason meetings, or even if you're trying to get more involved with the school.
Yeah. I'm also wondering if certain like liability waivers or things like that, because our participants in our program also as part of it often do sign like a photo release, which includes like a general liability as a nonprofit for us. And so I do also wonder like if there's a piece in that that can kind of be added of like people coming in knowing that they're like choosing to eat this or not. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. There was a number of questions about just how you collect your data, kind of starting with capturing people's contact information, since you mentioned a lot of things are analog. So could you maybe just walk us through the process of, how you get people's contact information, especially if they only come once, and then conduct that exit survey? That would be super helpful.
So with the attendance part, I usually have a sign-in sheet. So it's just like their first and last name, phone number, and also a really important thing that I changed, I think in the past 2 years, is adding that another question of how many people did you bring today? So, because sometimes maybe day-to-day families might bring all their kids or only 6 kids. So just like that's how we do our attendance. So, and then like people, like I just remind people to sign in every time they come, so that we don't lose like that data. And then what was the other part? Contact information. And then at the end of the season, we do that end of season survey. So and I can probably put that in the resource sheet, a copy of it, but there's just questions of like, how did you feel about this season? Or did the time work for you? What was your favorite part? Or did this program have you eat more healthy foods or vegetables? Or how many times did you go to the garden this year? So those are some examples of the questions, and they do change depending on the season of like, what was your favorite part about planting this spring?
Yeah, it's definitely, I will say it's a lot of time for Kim to like have the written analog sign-in sheets and exit interview questions and surveys, and Kim spends time putting in that information into like a spreadsheet. So there are sometimes people who might only come once. We do have that information. They might not fill out a survey, and at this point, that's one of the actual like it's one of the kind of challenges that we're trying to figure out too, is like, how do we maybe capture some more of that information if they only come once, but also understanding that we don't want to push the boundary or that trust relationship. So we might get fewer surveys at the end of the whole season, but we'll still have captured the attendance of who was there. And then as people continue to come back, they're more likely to also be willing to fill out something longer.
I really love that piece of how to balance kind of the trust and the relationship building with the, the data that's helpful to share and capture. Awesome. Well, we are at time, so I know there are a couple more questions, but I think we've covered the majority of them. Emily and Kim, thank you again so much. Just a couple of things to close this out. If you could go to the next slide. We once again have our Growing School Garden Summit webinar series coming this fall. Stay tuned for the schedule on that to be released in a couple of weeks. And then if you go to the next slide, this is the link to our survey. It has also been put into chat, and it will pop up when you close, when the webinar ends. Would love your feedback. And then finally, on the next slide, here is our contact information. You can reach us at info@sgsonetwork.org or on Facebook and Instagram. We tend to post and share about all of the different offerings that we have, whether it's virtual or in person. But thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your questions and your engagement and supporting one another in ideas and answers to questions as well. Thanks again, Emily and Kim. We really appreciate it, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye.